We're glad that we're surrounded by friends as we explore the nuances of dialogue cross-culturally and through the decades with the twists and turns that have occurred in the lives of these two folks who I've known for almost 30 years. And who knows what we might learn. So let me introduce our two participants tonight. Again, I've known both of them for 30 years. Dr. Lusharon Wiley, amazing, amazing woman. We're bringing it up. There we go. Currently serves as executive director and founding member of the Equity Project Alliance, which initiative started by who other? Kim and Julian MacQueen. And she's a community leader, been a community leader forever, as long as I can remember. Prior to that, she worked at the University of West Florida. She serves on numerous boards and does so much on our community. When I have issues of race, questions and things I'm concerned about, I call her. She is the go-to person in the community for me to go, I don't understand. And golly, if we all asked, I don't understand, and ask questions of people like Dr. Wiley or Dr. Wiley ask questions of me, we have great conversations in my office. This world would be a much better place. So I am so proud to call Dr. Wiley my friend. Give a big hand for Dr. Wiley. Bring her out here. There she is. There you go.
Tonight, to take that's right, with the radio on.
A crown jewel Pensacola right here. I gotta have her teach me those moves. I might hurt myself though. The next participant, I'm going to introduce him as an individual, but we all know this is a dynamic duo with this lady down in front. Kim and Julian do things in this community, many things most people don't know, but it's a tag team for sure. But Julian is the founder and chairman of Innisfree Hotels. It's the biggest hotel on the beach and other things. Kim and Julian have done so much in our community. Parent University of Pensacola, the Equity Project Alliance, very involved in the Escambia Children's Trust, the Bell Project of Pensacola, enormous work at Dixon School of the Arts, Independence for the Blind of Northwest Florida, the Hive Foundation, the MacQueen School Hospitality, UWF, the list goes on and on and on. And it's because of him and his vision and his frustration at the events following the death of George Floyd and his courage to write that editorial. I mean, think about it. A lot of wealthy white folks just said, yeah, that's a shame, and went on their business. Julian and Kim took action like they've done since the 30 years I've known and tried to make a difference. So bring out Julian MacQueen. Yeah. Those were hand-picked songs by them, by the way.
We will.
Well, here we go. We haven't even rehearsed this, so This is going to be fun.
Yeah.
So the first question is, what in the world made you say yes to having a public conversation about growing up in the South? I'm going to start with you, Julian.
When I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, I didn't know there was a race problem. I mean, think about that for a second. I was born in 1950 and graduated from high school in 1968. That's funny.
I think there was a better over-under bet over there.
And it was crazy. I mean, and as my life progressed and I went off to college, I realized that it was important to talk about racial issues and be out front about it and to be vulnerable and to tell folks that you don't understand what's going on. And in my case, and I'll talk about it later, but in my case, I was in an incredibly isolated situation. But really what informed me was my faith. As a Baha'i, member of the Baha'i faith, our religion talks about race being the most challenging issue for America. Now, it's a worldwide religion, but America, this is how our faith sees our country. And this goes back for centuries. So I feel it's an obligation as somebody that grew up in the South to have these conversations and learn from the whole experience.
That's wonderful. Lusharon?
Well, for me, the Julian, who is a bit older,
You're starting with that?
I am. Yeah. So it's been really interesting to really create a friendship with Kim and Julian that has been authentic, where we've been able to talk about things very deeply in a way that I haven't in the past. So it was creating a space where I felt safe to do so. And one of the pivotal points for me was I told Julian about the Green Book, and I shared that with some folks at Innisfree. And for African Americans, those of you who are old enough to remember this, there were times growing up where if you lived north and you were trying to come south, you couldn't stay in the hotels or use the restrooms along the way because they were white-owned, and you just couldn't. So the Green Book was developed so that you would know where you could go to the restroom, or if there was a space in the city that would accommodate you if you wanted to sleep in a hotel. And that was unheard of. And that was why you stayed with family, because there were no public accommodations for you. So anyway, one day I came into Innisfree and there was this book, and on the front of the book it said the Green Book. Well, it really sort of shocked me, because I was thinking, we have a Green Book today, and actually it was a publication on that was put out by a national hotel organization. But the front of the book looked like the Green Book, and I recall having shared the story about how the Green Book came to be. So Julian and I talked about that, and subsequent to that, he actually found 2 Green Books and presented them to me from the era when I was a child. So the authentic relationships, the genuine listening that I have seen is what made me comfortable enough to say, well, I can give him a peek into who I am. And so that's why I was comfortable enough to come here today. Safe, relationship building, eating together. We do have a story about, what was the restaurant that used to be at Inglewood? All in One, but we won't go there tonight. But that was the basis for being comfortable enough to share this evening.
That's awesome. Continue with you, Lusharon. What do you hope the biggest and greatest takeaway for the folks in the audience is tonight?
The importance of speaking truthfully, the importance of being vulnerable enough to say, I'm going to share this, and hope that it will be received in the spirit that it's given, from a place of care and from a need to make America better. And if we don't know each other, if we don't talk with each other, we won't get anywhere. It was like you said in your introduction, conversations, one by one, authentically.
That's awesome. Julian, how about you? Biggest takeaway?
Very much the same thing. I believe that transformation happens in small circles, and it's not a mistake that we're sitting in small tables tonight. And at every EPA event, you'll see the tables are very small, because that's where transformation happens. And we've watched that over the years now with EPA. So very much the same. Just my hope is that you meet someone, you have an insight, and you take that insight home, and then you do something with it. That's my hope.
It reminds me of the story of the little boy throwing the starfish back, the whole beach covered with starfish. And the guy said, you're never going to save them all. You can just say one at a time, right? So if we can change the hearts and minds of some people, not only just in this room, but we go out and change the minds and hearts of other people that we know, just to have the conversation, then we'll start saving our community, right? So that's great. Julian, I'm going to start with you. If you can remember this far back. At what age and under what circumstances do you remember becoming aware of your race? And what were your feelings about this discovery? Because you said it wasn't important. I mean, it wasn't that obvious way back when you first when you're in your youth? At what point did it become obvious?
Yeah, so, growing up, I grew up in a town called Mountain Brook, which was at the time one of the top richest zip codes in the United States. And this is in the 60s. And the person that raised me was my nanny, Mary Mack. And I really wasn't aware that there was a difference, I guess you could say, because she was essentially my mom. And
Mary Mack was black.
Mary Mack was black.
Okay, just make sure we're clear.
And yeah, that's interesting. I wouldn't even mention that. So yeah, she was black. And so from a child's standpoint, you don't think about those
Would it
things.
be great if we're all children again?
Yeah, it would be. And then in high school, you get around people that have opinions about black and white folks. And being, from the South, it became very clear that there was a difference. There was an inherent difference, that black folks really weren't very smart, and they really couldn't have a conversation with you. You kind of looked after them, you provided for them, and then they would come to work every day, and that was okay. That was fine. That was the way it was supposed to be. No problem. I had no problems. So think about that for just a second. Let that kind of circulate inside your system. And it wasn't really until I went to the university that I had my first conversation as an equal with a black person. And it turns out that black person taught me about the Baha'i faith.
Wow.
So it kind of blew my mind up in many different ways. So, I mean, I'll say more later about that setup, but that was really where I came from. I came from this, everything's fine. Everything's the way it should be.
When you first hit that discovery, that moment, what were those feelings that you had?
I can't remember like a moment. I think it was a slow burn, and in my case, it was. I felt betrayed. I felt like someone had pulled the wool over my eyes, that the world that was presented to me wasn't the world at all. And that if I wanted to be part of the world, I had to open my eyes up to the richness of diversity. And that was never part of my life. I was a plain vanilla white, kid from a rich neighborhood in Birmingham, Alabama. And if you can imagine this, in Birmingham, Alabama, 6 miles away from Mountain Brook, I didn't know there were any racial issues. And there were fire hoses and dogs and Bull Connor and so much horribleness going on. But all I knew is that I couldn't go downtown that day. It was no effect in my life, nothing.
Lusharon, at what age, it's kind of a crazy question, but at what age and under what circumstances did you become aware of your race, and what were your feelings about that?
Believe it or not, didn't take me as long in life as my senior, but for me, growing up in an all-black community, it was just the way that things were. I think it's the things that you hear from your parents. We didn't go into town very often, and when you went, you got a speech that told you how to behave. But I think for me, it was as I was coming of age, as the race riots occurred in America, as we saw the assassination of Dr. King, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. But most poignant for me was the disrespect that I saw for my parents. We used to have, and some of you may relate to this, insurance men, they were all men at that time, that would come to the house and they would take the money weekly to pay for your insurance policies. And I noticed, and it became, again, more apparent as I'm getting to be 14, 15 years old, they would always come in and call my mother Nancy. But they were only a few years older than I, so how do you have a right to call my mom Nancy and not Mrs. Bergman? So I can recall when I went off to Tuskegee during very radical years where I got exposed to H. Rat Brown, Angela Davis, Huey Newton. Y'all can look all of that up, but those were political activists who were instrumental in changing the landscape of America. And I can remember when I then came back to Valdosta from my first year at Tuskegee, and the same fellow comes over and he says, "Is Nancy at home?" And I said, "Mrs. Bergman is here. Would you like to speak with her?" And I did not let him in the house until she was referred to as Mrs. Bergman. But those things of demeaning the people in our lives that we looked up to, having to step off the sidewalk if someone is approaching you. And I guess another poignant memory for me is the books. We always had used books. I never had new books coming up. And we were expected to compete on a national level, but our books were always old. And I can remember when they would dump the books at my school, and you try to sort through to see which ones were good enough in good enough condition to be read. And I would sometimes look at the names in the books and wonder who were these other people. So it was that, just seeing those kind of inequities, but the safety of the community and the love of my community, I really didn't know I was missing anything until I was old enough to observe the differences.
How much do you think about race on your day-to-day life, Lusharon? And what do you think prompts this thinking?
I think it's living in America. Living in America. If we look at health, the health data, so much of our lives are impacted by what happens to us on a daily basis. Like going into a restaurant. Are you going to get seated in the first available seat, or are you going to be taken to near the kitchen or the restroom? That's one. I worry about my grandsons who are Black children. I worry about going into Gulf Breeze, so I definitely don't go over 35. And I know some of you all are saying, "Yeah, I know," but I'm telling you, if it's 3 of us and 2 of y'all are white, I'm going to get the ticket, okay? So I would say for me, it really has to be an everyday thing. I don't feel that I can let my guard down. In fact, just yesterday, I was in a community that I was unfamiliar with here in the city of Pensacola. And as I was going down this road, and it was sort of narrow with trees, I made a U-turn. I thought, I'm too afraid to continue on this road. I don't know it. If it dead ends somewhere where I'm not known, what might the consequences be? So I would say daily.
Wow. Julian?
It reminds me of the question of, when a Canadian asks you what Americans think of Canada, my answer is, we don't.
Right.
We don't think of Canada. Sorry, Kim. So the fact is, I don't ever think about it. My life is just fine, thank you. And this I think is one of the reasons that EPA was formed, is to create some banner to surround, to walk around, to be around, to start these conversations. And it's forced. I mean, truly, it's forced. Because on a daily basis, I don't think about it. I've got everything. I don't have to worry about, police, and if they stop me, I'm going to give them as much of a hard time as they give me. I mean, it's that kind of relationship. So, the answer is, I don't.
So the goal obviously is for you to think of it a little bit more on a daily basis, and hopefully get to a point where you're thinking about it a little bit less. Right? It's an interesting question. Is racism one-sided? Because we often think about Black racism. Is racism one-sided, or is racism exist in all forms and fashion of all colors? Lusharon?
If I were to answer you from my educational perspective, what we what we say is that it has to be one-sided because you don't have any power. You don't have power, how can you take racist acts? If I think about it just in everyday relationships, it can go both ways because some of us can be so mean-spirited. We don't know the people and we make assumptions about them, and I know you all know about your, not only do we have microaggressions toward people, but we have unconscious biases. We will assume so many things about people that are simply not true, which is the reason that our dinners, our conversations are so important. And when I talked about making yourself vulnerable, you really do have to be willing to open up and answer the questions that people might have. But at the same time, we want to be sensitive about the questions that we ask. I can remember several years ago now, working at one night at the University of West Florida, about 10 at night. I'm hanging out in the residence hall with some students, and we're talking about common ground and differences, and it was way cool. And people are always curious for whatever reason about hair. Hair is such a thing, right? It's such a thing.
You said we weren't going to talk about hair.
We're not, but I'm going to tell this little piece. But I can talk about it, but he is not allowed. Okay. So, so these students wanted to touch my hair because it's, you know, I have nice hair. So I do. Okay, let's admit that. So, so I said, well, just get in with your fingers. Just feel, do whatever you need to do. And so they did. No, Julian. So the deal is, what did they learn? Why did I do that? Because you want to take the mystery out of it. We're just people, right? We're simply people. And I got things like, oh, it's so soft, oh, I didn't know, blah, blah, blah. But how do we forge and build relationships, be vulnerable, give into it? And one thing I would say that I try to do is approach each relationship with unconditional positive regard. I'm gonna just believe that you want to do the very best that you can do. And even when we mess up, if we're doing our best, we're gonna get up and try again.
I love that. Julian, what about you? Do you have a response to that? Is racism one side?
Yeah, I mean, I go broad on that. And, you know, racism is you know, where anyone with your unconscious bias looks at a person that's different from them and starts making judgments. And I went to a talk not too long ago, and it says it takes 6 seconds for someone to form an opinion. 6 seconds. And what have you got in those 6 seconds to work with? Maybe nothing verbal.
Right.
Maybe it's just the appearance. And I'm aware of that. And I'm the worst offender. I can guarantee you. I sum people up. I look at them and I go, that person's this, you're that. I got you covered. You know, I know where you come from. I've seen it all. I've heard it all. And bam, I get hammered when I get to know a little bit further about who they are and what they are. I'm much older than you are.
Right.
And I've been a lot of places, and I've seen a lot of things, and you know, and I look at to me the most obvious, I guess, more popular item right now is the whole Palestinian-Israeli conflict. You know, there's that is the most racist, one of the most visual racist issues going on right now. And not to take away from what we're dealing with every day here with the black and white bias and prejudice, but I think it hits us all. I mean, you know, I form opinions and they're quick and they're hard, and then I work myself back from that.
I think what you said is really important because the more you're aware of that, the less that'll happen, right? So if we're not aware of that, we don't have these conversations because we all do it, right? We all, you know, all of us are guilty of that. I grew up in a family that everybody was judged by, you know, their ethnic background, and they were referred that way. So I didn't know any different, right? So we all make those judgment calls, but if we're aware of that and we're educated about that, then it typically is less. So thank you for bringing that up. Julian, you did this a little bit, but I want you to go a little deeper on describe the community you grew up in.
Yeah.
Include comments about the composition of your typical family structure, both you and your friends.
Yeah. So Mountain Brook, Alabama, and this is being recorded, so I'll probably be banded, but I'm third or fourth generation Birmingham, and more particularly in Mountain Brook. And we were so wealthy in Birmingham, Alabama, essentially, that we did not accept federal funds. The reason we didn't is so that we can remain white. So there was no integration. When all this was happening in the 60s, we were left out.
Opted out.
We opted out. We don't need the federal money, so we don't need no black folks. Everything is just fine. We've got our blue-blooded,
Hoity-toity.
Pardon me?
Hoity-toity.
Yeah, okay. We had this system. I mean, it was incredibly tight. You had sororities and fraternities in high school, and those folks dated each other, and then they went off to state school, Alabama, Auburn. They joined a fraternity or sorority there, and then they married each other and came back to Mountain Brook and did it all over again. I can go there today to the Birmingham or Mountain Brook Country Club, and I'm pretty darn sure I'll know half the people in the room, and they're the same people I was with in junior high and high school, elementary school.
Mostly two-parent families?
Pardon me?
Mostly two-parent families?
Two-parent families, yeah.
Mom and dad?
Yeah. It didn't occur to me they wouldn't be.
Right.
But, I think the important piece of that is that, in my particular experience, it was so incredibly separated that I didn't know there was a problem. I didn't know there was a different way to relate to black people other than as servants. We certainly wouldn't let them drink out of our glasses. We would have a mason jar in the back porch for our yard people. It was just amazing that this was the way it was, and that's how I thought it was always going to be. And then it turns out I was a terrible student. I didn't make the grade to go to the University of Alabama, so University of South Alabama took a chance on me, and I got there and I got thrown into the world. I came from wealth, but my dad lost everything. And by the time I was in high school, he said, "You're on your own." Good luck with that Vietnam thing. We were talking earlier about the Vietnam thing. I mean, it controlled my life. And good luck. You got to work your way through school. So I started working as a night auditor from 11 at night to 7 in the morning at the Admiral Sims in Mobile. And I got confronted with life. Life was right there. From 11 at night to 7 in the morning, all kinds of stuff happens in downtown Mobile.
None of it good.
Yeah, not good. An interesting side note, the guy that was playing in the bar was this guy it was a bar with 20 seats. It was this guy named Jimmy Buffett. Every night I was listening to Margaritaville. So it was just one of those kind of times where you got life hit you in the face, and I wasn't prepared for it at all.
Lusharon, my guess is your community is a tad different, and the family
Yes,
structures for you and your friends
Yes.
a tad different.
Just a tad different. What we have in common is that, in my remembrance, divorce was generally not an option. So, two-family households were common. Both parents worked. And it's interesting to hear you say, Julian, that you had a servant in your household. My mother worked as a domestic worker for a while. She worked in a pecan factory. We worked in tobacco and cotton to make ends meet. But we did live in a home, had never been in an apartment until I moved to Chicago, so didn't know about that kind of thing. And family was big for us. Family was huge. And so we were surrounded by multi-generations. So my upbringing included my mother, my aunts, my great-aunts, and my great-great-aunts, some of those having been born in the 19th century. so around 1880. So having just come out of slavery, and so some of them, their parents were enslaved. So it's a very different environment. But I think the love and family was very big, and our family was huge. There were 9 of us and a stepsister, and so big family, big gatherings, but doing whatever you could do to make ends meet, and we did make ends. We always were told, if it's honest work, it's okay. And so my mother at night, after work and during the day, would often take in laundry, and I don't know if you all know what that's about, some may, but what I'm talking about is she would iron shirts, and at that time you iron sheets as well. So shirts, pants, and whatever for folks, 15 cents for a shirt, 25 cents for pants, and we sold the snow cones. We made them, called them frozen cups, so she was also known as the frozen cup lady. So those were some of the differences that we had. And you know, we hear it all the time. I hear it almost every day where people said, I didn't know we were poor. Well, truly we didn't. We had a house, we had a car, we had love and plenty food. But I do want to tell you all something that I think you'll find interesting. Because we didn't go to town very often, number one, there wasn't a lot of money to do so. Number two, when we went, usually with our parents, because you could get in trouble and we couldn't risk that. So we had what was known as a rolling store. And the rolling store man would come into your community. And this is really cool. Maybe we should do it today. But anyway, he would have this modified truck that he could open the sides up. And it would have, how many of y'all know what hair grease is? You know what hair grease? All right, I see y'all. All right, so we would have hair grease that you could buy. You could have iron, what's it called for ironing your hair? What's it? Straightening comb, thank you. Y'all know, all right, see, they know. And blankets and candy bars. So there were things that you could buy from the rolling store, which kept you from having to go into town. And I think that was something really unique for that to be in our community. And I don't know how common that was. I've not heard of other people speak of that.
Let's lighten it up a little bit. You guys have some walk-up songs. So let's talk about music a little bit. You know, Sharon, you said that your era produced the best music ever. I think that's arguable, but I'm saying. So, Julian, what was your favorite kind of music? Tell me your 2 biggest stars from the 60s and 70s. Yes. And did music shape your views of race in America in any way? So
yeah, in our community, we would have these balls, and we would hire the Platters to come and play for us, and the Drifters, and we would have them come and play for us, and we thought they were really cool. We were big Motown folks, and then college happened, and my consciousness changed a lot, and so I'm big Led Zeppelin, Beatles, Black Sabbath, Cream. Y'all remember all them, right? Yeah. No.
Did it shape your views of race in America?
No, not really. I mean, again, these were entertainers. These were black entertainers, and they had their place, and they entertained us. And
servant mentality, kind of.
Yeah, we didn't talk to them. You wouldn't do that.
Right.
I mean, you would just
thing,
pay them,
yeah.
And they would go back to where they came from, and we would rock out.
Lusharon, same questions? Favorite kind of music, 2 biggest stars?
Okay, so the kind of music.
This is so weird.
I know yours is weird because you came out on Sitting on the Dr. Bay.
Yeah. So anybody remember Otis Redding?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you would think that would be like her star, right?
Now, I do love Otis Redding, a Georgia boy. All right, let's go ahead and say it. And that's Albany, Georgia, in case you want to know how to pronounce that. But anyway, Am I right? Miss Ada, all right, talk to me. So anyway, the music that helped shape me for the first several years of my life was country and western. We didn't have, don't go, oh Lord, here's the deal. The deal is we did not have any black stations in my hometown, right? So every day when I came home from school, we would listen to, and now it's time for Country Garden, and boy, the banjos would play, and I just loved it, and so yes, and I still like country music. Of course, as I got older, I got introduced to rhythm and blues, soul music, and I love soul music as well. I have to tell you, I love the big band era. My mother loved big band with Lawrence Welk and that era, so it's still good to me. So for the most part, I just like music. I really like music, but if I'm down and out, I go back to country and western. I want to hear that.
That's so wrong.
My country music.
Did music
so
shape
wrong.
your views of race? And what stars out there do you think have done the best job of trying to tell that story?
Oh my gosh, there are so many. Looking at the era that I grew up in, one of the ones that I think about is I'm Black and I'm Proud. Say it loud. Sing with me. I'm Black and I'm Proud. Hello. So that was in the 60s, right? And before that era, when Gandhi did the Back to Africa movement, before that, we didn't want to be called black. We were being called colored. And so colored was good and Negro was good, but if you called me black, we were going to fight. So changing the mentality to know that blackness was okay, to know that black was beautiful, those themes about black is beautiful. And then Marvin Gaye, when he said what's going on with the Vietnam War and people going off and being killed, Harry Belafonte, really that era is so huge. And if you listen to that music from the mid-60s to mid-70s, there's a lot of radical music there that talks about, because as you know, music reflects what's going on in the world. And for us, we were in turmoil. We had the race riots going on, and then we had Vietnam going on, and we had so many blacks being sent to Vietnam, frontline. So when you ask about that, about the music, I also have to say, and the war, because every night we would sit in front of the TV because we knew so many men, young men, 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds who were sent to Vietnam, and did not come home. So we would sit in front of that TV to see who we knew who was killed in Vietnam, hoping that our brother was not among the tragedies.
And the draft was pretty disproportionate.
Very much so.
Yeah. So those kind of things certainly shape our lives. Two other big events that I know had an impact on you guys. The assassination of John F. Kennedy and the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. Talk a little bit about your thoughts there, how they impacted you then and moving forward, and your thoughts about life, race, all those kind of things.
Yeah, so I'll start with John F. Kennedy. I was in 9th grade, and I was in civics class, and they announced over the speaker that President Kennedy had been shot. And the response from the class was applause.
Wow.
It was applause. I don't know if anybody experienced that, but that was my experience of John F. Kennedy's assassination. Because everybody in our community certainly didn't want a Catholic in as president.
Wow.
And the fact that he was open to whatever the things he was open to was appalling to our people.
Well, it shows you an interesting part. You're in 9th grade.
9th grade.
But they didn't have those views by themselves.
No.
They were generated from the family. So it just shows you the impact of where you grow up, who you grow up with, and the influence they have, because most 9th graders on their own aren't going to have those thoughts, right? So it's important for us to have the conversation so our kids don't have those thoughts. So after that, what were your thoughts? And when you heard Dr. Martin Luther King was killed?
What was the last part?
Dr. Martin Luther King.
Dr. King. So that was 68, and I was just coming out of high school. So I was in that kind of half-light. I was aware that there was something bigger out there than my little kingdom of Mountain Brook. And, but it wasn't that big of a deal. It just wasn't. Not in my life. I just thought, that's a terrible thing. And, we had Robert Kennedy killed at the same time. And, it was, to me, it was inconvenient, but it wasn't impactful.
Wow.
I guess you have a little different response.
Just a little. When Kennedy was shot, I was in 7th grade in a history class. And when it came over the intercom, the whole school, it seemed, just got silent. I want to say we were allowed to go home early that day, but it was a sense of complete disbelief. When Dr. King was killed, I can recall that do y'all know what hanging up clothes is, what a clothesline is? So I was taking in clothes from the clothesline, and one of my brothers came to the door and said, Dr. King has been shot. And what I remember more than my reaction was my mother's wail. We rushed into the house to gather around the TV with tears just streaming from all of our faces, again in shock and disbelief. And it felt like two of the heroes in terms of racial justice, moving us toward something that was better. To see that just taken away, it just felt like it can't get any worse than this. And it did. It got worse.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be great to have heroes like that today?
Yeah.
Certainly is needed today. And we talked about the disparity of Vietnam, Lusharon, and we hear a lot of conversation about two different words, equity and equality, and how they differ. Mm-hmm. And not everybody gets that. There's a difference between equity and equality. Equality means that we treat all people the same way and provide them the same resources. Equity recognizes everyone's circumstances, what resources will help them be successful, and distributes those resources based on the needs of recipients. Because I hear a lot of my friends say, well, everybody's got equal opportunity. So can you share can you tell me what your thoughts are, Lusharon, about those two words? And does everybody have that equal opportunity and the inequities and inequality that you've experienced?
Well, first, let me just say the way that you've described that is incredibly important, because equity takes into account what are some of the pre-existing factors that would impact where this person is today. And we hear a lot that we should get over it as African Americans, just get over it. And remember that slavery hasn't ended that long ago, and certainly Jim Crow hasn't been that long ago. And if we weren't still facing some of the same challenges, we could let it go because we would be in a good place. But we're not in a good place. When we look at the data, some of you came to the data walk for Escambia County, and you see what the disparities are. When you hear me say that I get my tightness in the chest in certain circumstances, and then I hear Julian say, well, that's not even something I consider. Even if you could just hear that on a daily basis, so often, we're having to prove that we exist, that we are smart, and that we are capable. And again, I have Black grandchildren, because I'm Black, so my grandkids are Black. And so when you get that from your instructors, see, it's one thing, kids will find a way to be okay with each other. But as adults, we do a lot of things that harm. And when you say to a Black child in the classroom, if they ran faster than the other children in a very multiculturally diverse environment, it's not okay to say, well, of course you won because you're black and you're better athletes. Really? Could it be because they practiced hard? That they had good coaching and they were willing to listen to the coach? All those things that go into who they are, right? And don't just look at the fact that because of the color of their skin. And I have a grandson, both grandsons are about 6'4", right? And one of them does no sports. Okay. But he's very cerebral, so he likes his chess and he likes building games. He wants to build games, so that's what he wants to do, create computer stuff. And the other one is very athletic, right? He's a basketball. He's a superstar. So you can't just look at them and assume what they're going to be. But we do have to look at where do people come from, what were their experiences, did they have the opportunity? When I think about the sport of golf is not a poor man's sport, right? So if I grew up like Julian and we went to a country club, I would know what a divot is, right? I would know that because we played with golf, we put the ball on the divot, blah, blah, blah. If I didn't have that, what I know is a basketball, and I'm gonna know a baseball. But I won't know the subtleties of this other game because I've never played it. Doesn't mean lack of ability, lack of exposure, and lack of opportunity.
Julian, what about you? Talk about equity and equality.
Well, I'm on a learning curve, right? When I was kind of thrown into the world, because our wealth ended when I was a senior in high school. My dad came to me and said, "Good luck with that Vietnam thing, and you're on your own." And all my brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, everyone got a free ride through university. And equity and equality really is a new concept to me. And when I started EPA, one of the first books we handed out to everybody was How to Be an Anti-Racist and White Fragility. And this started informing me, really, and that's really only, 4 or 5 years ago, about the difference and how important that difference is to recognize. And we did a great exercise that kind of underlined that difference, because there is a big difference between equity and equality.
Absolutely. I think about our community. We continue to be one of the poorest counties in Florida, and I have no idea why. It frustrates the stew out of me, and a lot of it's due to generational poverty. Right? When I was a big brother, and I saw my friend Paula Shell back there, the CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters, when I was a big brother, my little brother's family didn't want to be poor. They had no idea how not to be poor because everybody they ever knew in their family was poor. So you can't say that everybody's got equal opportunity when nobody that nobody has a clue about how not to be poor. So it's important for us to realize not everybody has to start at the same starting line, right? We all can finish, right? But not everybody starts at the same spot, and that's a really important thing. We're gonna got about 4 minutes left, so I'm gonna jump to some of the one I think is two most important questions. Julian, I'm gonna start with you. What can we do, what advice would you give the people in the audience today and the people that are gonna watch this online to help create a more inclusive and equitable community? And what kind of conversations would you like to see them have when they're either confronted with seeing racism happen or how to prevent it in the future? So that's a lot in one question, but.
Yeah, there's a lot, and with 4 minutes left, I would encourage y'all to have conversations with each other, with people that are not like you, and keep your mind and eyes and heart open to the possibility that you may not have all the answers. This organization, the Equity Project Alliance, was started to create conversations between folks that are not the same. and particularly black and white folks. And what I'm aware of is that I absolutely don't know what it's like to walk around in a black skin in Pensacola, Florida. And that was kind of the beginning of the Equity Project Alliance, where us white folks, could start listening to the black experience from a black person and try to learn and possibly gain some insight into what that must be like. And it's been a wild ride. I mean, it's been revelation on revelation on revelation.
The people you've met, the stories you've heard, have all helped change your life a little bit.
Sorry?
The people you've met, the stories you've heard,
Right.
have helped change your life over the past
Yeah,
years.
and so I would encourage y'all to break bread together, to sit down and have a meal with each other and to tell stories about your children and your struggles. And ultimately, what you'll find is that we're all dealing with the same thing from two different perspectives. And the fact that racism, and Kim doesn't like me saying this, but we're all racists. We can't help it. I mean, it's and to take that term and to use it as a club, I think, is what we have struggled with in having this conversation. So I recognize that I'm a racist, and by that I mean that I cannot understand, I will never understand what it's like to be a black person. And by definition, that means that I see myself separate. I see myself different from that experience. And I would encourage everybody not to use that word as a weapon. That if someone, and unfortunately, that's where you usually hear it. It's usually somebody wants to punish somebody. But the fact that I will never know Lusharon's experience, and she'll never know mine. And each of them bring with each other a host of challenges of how to come together and be one people. And that's been a theme ever since I've been a member of the Baha'i faith, is that we are one people. And to the degree that we can recognize that, our lives will be richer. We'll gain more insight into how to be in the world. And it's not easy. It's something where there's got to be some awkward moments. You have to recognize some of these blinders that you have on. Early on, like the very first EPA meeting, when I knew we were on the right track, was when this very liberal white woman was talking to this black woman, and she explained to her, I don't see race. Mm-hmm. I don't see color.
I said, no, I'm kidding.
We're all the same. It's okay. I don't see color. We're fine.
Yeah, right.
And then I watched this black lady explain to her just how wrong she was to say something like that. And it was done with love, and it was done with grace, and it was done with kindness. And I watched that light bulb go off going, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I see your blackness, and I know that makes you special, and I want to learn more. That was the moment when I knew we were on the right track.
That's awesome. Sharon, same question.
And I really feel like I probably was the one that said something because we really, step away from that. Step away from it. If that is something that you say, I don't see color, stop it. Okay. So let me just say that. But in terms of, I don't even remember the question, but I think I got caught up. But here's what I want to tell you in terms of forming relationships across differences versus a willingness to be vulnerable. It is to have the awkward and difficult conversation It is to enter that relationship again with unconditional positive regard, because once you say that I want to talk with you, be willing to have the conversation, be willing to listen, squint with both ears so that you have an opportunity to learn, and you will walk away doing better. And every time that you have a conversation, it can be better. And that's what we're all doing. We're striving simply to be better humans. And when you hear somebody talk about the other, there is no other. We is it, folks. We are the human race.
Well, we're out of time. I was going to ask you about your legacy, but I'm going to do that one for you. Dr. Wiley, from the time I've met you at University of West Florida to your time at EPA and all the community events you have, you've made such an impact on so many people.
Thank you.
This effort that you're in now is just continuing that legacy, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Julian and Kim, your impact is large throughout the whole community, and we just know a piece of it. And I know you guys do things in other communities as well. But the things you do and done to try and bridge the gap that we all have that inherent biases and prejudices, and you guys are working really hard to bridge that gap. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
You guys have made enormous impact. So thank you.
Good job. And I want to just take this moment to thank you. You all do not know how much energy John put into this from the beginning. He said yes, he committed to it, and he did it in a big way. He is someone that I admire. Ask me why later, he knows. But we have a long, long history together. Because see, here's the thing. You never know who people are until you get to know them. Don't hear other people's stories, find out for yourself. Thank you all so much for listening. And
so the next 30 minutes, you're going to spend time at your table answering this question amongst yourselves. What was the most impactful thing to you from tonight's conversation? Each of you have a table captain. They're going to take copious notes. We're going to compile all that and have it available for you at some point.
Yes.
But then, and then at about 7:45, we'll dismiss everybody. But have a great conversation, and thank you so much.
Wait. Before we go, I want to call out somebody in the audience. Bob Zellner is.
Yes.
Bob Zellner is here. Bob Zellner was the first white man to join SNCC, which was the Students for Nonviolent
Coordinating
Committee. He's from Brewton, Alabama. He has led the charge in civil rights. He is a living legend. Bob, I know standing up and down is a thing, but if you don't mind just standing up for just a second so people can see you and recognize you. And I've got one more thing that I'd like to do, and I'd just like to take a moment.
All right, get answering those questions. Have a great conversation. We'll be back in about 20 minutes.